Wuni Kisuk. My name is Jordan Clark, and I'm the Executive Director of the Harvard University Native American Program. And I'm a citizen of the Wampanoag Tribe of Aquinnah. I'm here to give you a few words about the history, work, and impact of HUNAP. HUNAP has served the Harvard community since 1970. Our program is an interfaculty initiative that's led by our faculty director, Joseph Ganz, and guided by our faculty advisory board. Professor Ganz is away on sabbatical this year, and he's unable to join us tonight. HUNAP has four main focuses: education, community, scholarship, and inclusion. Our work spans the entire university, from supporting admissions and recruitment, student, faculty, and staff support, tribal diplomacy, and public programming. Our academic focus is centered in supporting seminars and workshops through our student groups, the Mahindra Humanities Center, and the partnerships across the university. Our HUNAP grants focus on research connected to Native communities. We do this work through the promise and responsibility of our university, that our university holds from the Charter of 1650. Tonight's lecture will be the fifth installment of the HUNAP Annual Lecture, a series of talks intended to elevate and promote sophistication of Native ideas, arts, literature, and culture by bringing innovative Indigenous thinkers to Harvard. Past lectures were delivered by U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo, New York Times bestselling author and critic David Trier, author and Pulitzer Prize finalist Tommy Orange, and actress Paulina Alexis. This event was made possible by the support of Arts Thursdays, the Harvard Art Museums, Harvard Libraries, the Department of English, the Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology, the Weatherhead Canada Program, the Harvard Kennedy School Project on Indigenous Governance and Development, and the Department of Anthropology. We sincerely thank all of our partners for helping make this program possible. It is also my honor to welcome you all to this space and place. Since its founding, Harvard University has had relationship with Native nations in this territory. In the Charter of 1650, Harvard directly declares its dedication to the education of English and Indian youth. As the Charter is still the living governing document of our university, this promise stands today. Harvard also has impacted Native nations in our area since its founding. The creation of the John Eliot Bible, translated and printed by James Printer from Nipmuc Nation, was a tool to spread Christianity amongst our communities. The Indian College's first graduate, Caleb Chishatimuk, citizen of the Wampanoag Tribe of Aquinnah. The impact of Phineas Fish, Harvard College graduate of 1807 on the Wampanoag Tribe of Mashpee, and the enslavement of Titus of the Wampanoag Tribe of Aquinnah by Harvard presidents Benjamin Wadsworth and Edward Holyoke during the 1700s. The many legal minds educated at Harvard who helped to create the laws and systems used to erase and eradicate Native language, history, and culture. The predatory anthropological practices that took ancestors from many tribal nations to this institution throughout its history. These are a few examples of the impact of our university on the communities who have called this land home for time immemorial. With this in mind, we will continue our work and take seriously the responsibility of our institution, and we as members of it take on during our time here. Impact can be both positive and negative. The work we do collectively aims to balance the scales of history. With each small step we take to creating a mutual beneficial relationship with tribal nations of this region and honor and uphold the promises made since the founding of this university. We strive to challenge ourselves not just to meet, but exceed those responsibilities and those that we have to the nations who have called this a place of learning well before Harvard University. I would like to thank Sarah Ganz Blythe, the Elizabeth and John Moores Cabot Director, and the wonderful staff of the Harvard Arts Museum for co-sponsoring this lecture and for the assistance in planning the event. I would also like to acknowledge the HUNAP staff for their tireless work putting together this program and their work throughout the year for our community. Sarah will now join us to offer a few remarks on behalf of the Harvard Art Museums and Arts Thursdays. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan, for that warm welcome, and I want to offer my sincere welcome to all of you. We are so grateful that HUNAP has again continued to think of the Harvard Art Museums as a place for the annual lecture, and we look forward to many in the years to come. As with last year, the HUNAP annual lecture series is included in this semester's Arts Thursdays program. And Arts Thursdays is a university-wide initiative sponsored by the Harvard University Committee on the Arts. The program makes art freely available and open to the public and to promote access to the arts both here and to the community around us. And with that, I'd like to invite the outgoing leaders of Natives at Harvard College to introduce our speaker tonight. Please welcome Lena Tinker and Anthony Miguel. Thank you.
Tagunda Malinani Anthony. Hi, my name is Anthony. Audience members are welcome to submit questions at any time during the discussion, and we will get to as many as we can. Whether you are here in person or watching online, you can submit questions using the link provided on the screen behind me and posted in the chat on the webinar. It is now my honor to introduce our moderator for the evening, Pexa, and our annual lecturer this year, Angeline Boulley. We will introduce them now, and then we will welcome them onto the stage. Angeline will begin with a reading, and then we will move into our conversation. Christopher Pexa is Brakinta, Dakota, enrolled in Spirit Lake Nation and Washichu from French, Polish, and Irish peoples. He is Associate Professor of English at Harvard University, where his work is dedicated to indigenous literatures, politics, and language learning and revitalization. His scholarly work has appeared in PMLA, American Literature History, MELUS, and Studies in American Indian Literatures, among others. His first book, Translated Nations, Rewriting the Dakota Oyate, won the 2018-2019 MLA Prize for Studies in Native American Literatures, Languages, and Cultures, and the 2019 Labriola Center American Indian National Book Award. His second book project, Sovereign Flows, Indigenous Future Making Beyond Borders, examines a range of texts from the late 19th century to the present that assert movement or flows of indigenous bodies, languages, and aesthetics as key means for decolonizing indigenous future making.
Angeline Boulley, an enrolled member of the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa Indians, is a storyteller who writes about her Ojibwe community in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. She is a former director of the Office of Indian Education at the U.S. Department of Education. Angeline lives in Southwest Michigan, but her home will always be on Sugar Island. Angeline was born into storytelling people and was first introduced to the art through generational oral tradition. Yet during her childhood, Angeline struggled with her biracial indigenous identity. In searching for representation through the stories and books she was reading, she realized that examples she found lacked depth and true experience. It wasn't until her mid-40s that she realized she could write her own experience into existence. Firekeeper's Daughter is her debut novel and was an instant #1 New York Times bestseller. The book has been named the Walter Dean Myers Award for Outstanding Children's Literature, the Prince Award, the William C. Morris Award for YA Debut Literature, and was also an American Indian Youth Literature Award honor book. Called a quote-unquote indigenous Nancy Drew, the central character is a Native teen who must root out the corruption in her community after witnessing a shocking murder. Her second novel, Warrior Girl Unearthed, was published in 2023 and was also an instant New York Times and Indies bestseller. This novel takes us back to Sugar Island and is a high-stakes thriller about the power of discovering your stolen history. Angeline's newest novel, Sisters in the Wind, is a daring new mystery about a foster teen claiming her heritage on her own terms. Please join me in welcoming Pexa and Angeline Boulley.
Got a lot of props. Let's see. One moment, please. How? I had to write this next part down. Anin inada wemagan, indina wemagan, Angeline. And hamitakupi, nina daya yahipi, Buju Indinawe Maganidog. Is that okay? Welcome, everyone. It's my pleasure to be in conversation tonight with Angeline Boulley. And we're going to have time. The conversation begins after the reading, yeah? Is that what we decided on?
Yes.
So Angeline's going to read something for us all, and then we'll chat, and then we'll open it up to your comments and your questions, which I understand this tablet will help field. So, but thank you all for coming out tonight, and without further ado, we can.
Buju, Anin, Angeline Boulley, Misko Makokwe Nadishnakas, Makwadodam, Bawating, and Donjaba, Chi Magwetch. Hello, everyone. I'm Angeline Boulley. I'm Bear Clan, and I'm from Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. We call it the place of the rapids, Bawating. And it's my honor to be here with you tonight. And we're going to start off with a reading from my second book, Warrior Girl Unearthed, which I pitched as Indigenous Lara Croft, but instead of raiding tombs, she's raiding museums and private collections to retrieve ancestral remains and sacred items. But being 16 years old, none of her heists go the way that she plans. So the story starts out with 16-year-old Perry intending to enjoy a summer of slack, but she gets into a fender bender that was totally not her fault. And her auntie Donis makes her take the last job available that summer in the tribe's internship program. She has to work with Kookie, Cooper Turtle, at the tribal museum. He takes her to a meeting at Mackinac State College, and she begins learning about NAGPRA, and they visit one of the professor's offices. Offices reveal clues about their occupants. The principal at the tribal school had inspirational quotes from indigenous leaders. The alternative school principal has a gigantic beanbag chair that you can plop onto if she's in the office with the door open. Mom's corner office at the tribal health center doesn't have any plants or personal belongings, except for one framed photo on her desk. Despite having been the tribal health director for 13 years, she believes a day will come when she upsets one tribal council member too many and gets shit-canned. She tells her staff, never get cozy, make the tough decisions, be prepared to leave with your head held high. According to her office, Dr. Fenton is an unorganized hoarder whose office pets are the cozy dust bunnies napping everywhere. I stand beside Cooper in the middle of what might be a living room. File folders, loose papers, and shoeboxes are stacked floor to ceiling. Assorted coffee mugs rest on outcroppings of books. Her desk appears to be a dining room table converted in a patchwork of books and papers and what the hell? She has a ceremonial medicine bag made from an otter pelt. It's spread across her desk like a fur scarf with loom-beaded patches on its paws and tail. I barely hear Dr. Fenton offer to get bottled water from the fridge, and Cooper accept. As soon as she heads to the kitchen, Cooper growls into my ear, "Not a single word." She returns with bottled water. Cooper thanks her for both of us. I chug the ice-cold biche. "I'd love to see anything you care to show us." He gestures around the room. "Well, there's this big guy." She points at the otter bag. "What can you tell me?" Her tone irritates me. I picture her dressing the otter in baby clothes and bonnets. I don't want Cooper to tell her anything, but he does. Otter is part of our creation story, and otter medicine bags are part of our ceremonies. Do you know this one's provenance? "Oh, one of our history professors passed away last spring," Dr. Fenton says. "The cleaning crew discovered some boxes in his office closet and even more boxes in the attic." She motions for us to follow her. As we do, she continues speaking. "They came across these boxes marked with his name. They opened one, saw items that looked old and odd, and brought the lot to me. Dr. Fenton grins and gestures like a game show host, revealing a hallway of rickety metal shelving units packed to capacity with storage bins, cardboard boxes, and, Jesus take the wheel, several fruit boxes. It seems ridiculous that a box originally for shipping bananas might be filled now with bones or cultural items. More boxes are stacked on the floor, practically blocking the hallway. His boxes are on the floor. I still haven't finished a proper inventory of my own items. Her items? She doesn't own them. As I mentioned in the meeting, I need more time to finish the inventory, she says. More time? I'm about to get in her face when I catch Cooper mean mugging me. There is no misinterpreting his clenched jaw and furrowed brow. Cooper, you know NAGPRA didn't include appropriations for institutions to complete the inventories. I'm responsible for the museum's collection. You know I do my best, but I cannot be more specific in describing the items without the time and resources to properly catalog them. She hands a box from the floor to Cooper, telling him to give it to me. Give it? As in take back to Sugar Island? I blurt. No, dear, wouldn't that be an unorthodox repatriation? She's the only one who laughs. Let's see what's in these boxes. It'll be like Christmas. Her giggle turns childlike. The box is very light. I use my nails to pick at the packing tape when an odd feeling comes over me, as if I were tuning Pops's old radio station and the static just became a crystal clear signal. I glance around. Cooper and Dr. Fenton are each opening a box, but they don't seem to feel anything odd. If you need my help completing the inventory, Cooper begins, I'd be happy to gather our volunteer committee. She interrupts. That's kind of you, but I need a highly skilled assistant. I fight the urge to throw the box at her smug, highly skilled head. Instead, I open the box to find 4 baskets woven from black ash and accents of braided wingashk. I pick one basket and hold it to my nose. Maybe I'm only imagining the faintest whiff of sweetgrass, because how could that soothing scent linger for decades? As I tip the basket to check for a signature, a soft rattle calls to me like a lullaby. Something is inside. I look up. Their backs are to me. As I look through the contents of one box together, I turn my back as well and gently pry the snug basket lid from the base. The basket is filled with flat, almond-shaped seeds, some type of squash. I tilt the base until a dozen or so seeds slide into my palm. My heart races from the thrill that I might be holding heirloom seeds from a variety that hasn't been planted in decades. Maybe these were handed down over several generations, or even ancient. If the basket was stored somewhere cool, dark, and dry, the seeds might be viable. Dr. Fenton, Cooper begins, the Sugar Island Tribe accepts funding requests twice a year from, I'd be happy to help you submit a request on behalf of the college for a collections assistant. What a wonderful idea, she says, but why limit ourselves to just one collections assistant? We could request an entire team. We'd complete the inventory. We would model a process that could be presented at academic conferences. We could become the premier institution for cultural anthropology. Dr. Fenton's ambition fills the room like one of my dog's atomic farts. I've heard Wendigo stories my whole life. A Wendigo is a greedy cannibal that grows larger and more powerful with each person it consumes. This is the first time I've heard one be born. With my back still turned, I gaze upon the ivory seeds cupped in my palm. They look like eye openings staring back at me. It might be better to start with a modest request, Cooper reasons. Nonsense, Dr. Fenton declares. Let's aim for the stars. I slide the seeds into my pants pocket. They might be the only items to get repatriated from Dr. Fenton, the hoarder's office, in my lifetime.
so much in that passage. I'm not sure where to start. I think you took us right to the heart of the novel in so many different ways, through the black ash baskets, through the seeds, and through Perry's desire. This is going to be tricky. I have to ask questions that don't spill the beans, that don't reveal
Oh yeah,
the plot.
we're in a spoiler-free zone.
Yeah, for 2 thriller detective novels, this is going to be tricky. I'll do my best. But through the squash seeds, again, through Perry's desire to repatriate, or maybe rematriate both, to NAGPRA, the legal structure that governs, in some ways, her and the tribe's relationships to these objects. And I want to get at that term objects in maybe a second, because I think it's kind of a strange term. So if NAGPRA is the sort of the main legal and ethical context for your second novel, Warrior Girl Unearthed, and it's a 1990 federal law. I'm sure you all know, but I'll say it anyway. A 1990 federal law that stipulates the conditions for the return of Native American human remains, funerary objects, sacred objects, and objects of cultural patrimony that are held in federally funded institutions. So there are limitations baked into the law, which the novel explores, including what do you do with collections of ancestors and these sacred objects, objects of cultural patrimony that fall outside of that federal funding designation. I won't, so again, reveal too much about the plot, but the novel points out some glaring loopholes or omissions in the law too, like how it doesn't apply to culturally unaffiliated objects, or items that that are in private collections again, or that don't have a clear provenance. And this is a long question, but it's like, I think the way to get into it maybe. So Warrior Girl shows maybe how easy it is to fudge or falsify or even erase provenance with these items. For instance, maybe by claiming a water leak, damaged labels or records beyond legibility. And in order to create that culturally unaffiliated status, right? To sort of introduce an insurmountable doubt, right, in that chain of possession. And I keep using air quotes because it may be clear, but I have doubts about the terms possession and objects in relation to, especially, but not exclusively, ancestors' remains. There's a question in all this. I'm not just trying to be a typical academic and talk for 15 minutes and then not really even ask a question. I was thinking of the ancient one too, or so-called Kennewick Man, which is an example that you mentioned, that's mentioned in the novel too, who was finally reclaimed from the Burke Museum in Seattle, and after how many years? 20 in the museum, and 20 before that, and reburied by Umatilla, Nez Perce, Yakima, Colville, and Wanapum nations in 2020. So the ancient one is an important instance of going beyond NAGPRA's logic of possession, it seems to me, that privileges settler museum ways of knowing, of writing and remembering the past, since it was in large part oral testimony, oral history, oral tradition that helped the tribes to establish their kinship connection with him. So here's the question. In terms of returning ancestors to their and our relatives, what do you see as the differences between, say, possession and, on the one hand, and caretaking? Something like caretaking and kinship on the other.
Repeat just that question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So
the difference between
possession,
which
is the word that's in the law, right? And on the one hand, the legal hand, and then on our human hands, kinship, or like caretaking based in kinship.
I've never been asked that before. Really, I think, probably there are tribal historic preservation officers that could give a much better answer. Possession, the difference between possession and caretaking. Well, you know, Dr. Fenton possessed the boxes of, you know, the collection in her office. Was she caretaking? No. And so I go through, you know, the difference between like how Cooper, his office, how meticulous it is, how that tribes, the people that I've met that do repatriation work for tribes, they take such care. It just feels different. There's the significance of the items that they're handling, the protocols that they follow. It goes beyond a clinical into something more meaningful. Yeah. That's the best I can do.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I was thinking too of those baskets. So maybe you could talk about those, because it's such a beautiful description. We had a conversation last night over dinner too, so I'm trying not to assume too much, make you feel left out or something. So I'll try and narrate the backstory. So we talked a little bit about the black ash baskets, the grandma's baskets, and how Perry feels towards them and with them, and that comes through a little bit in in the passage you read. But could you maybe say more about that?
Two things. First, I include a quote from Sid Martin, and she's a basket maker, and comes from basket makers. And when she talks about a basket that she has that her mother made, she talks about how the spirit of that tree is in that basket, and the spirit of her mother is in that basket. And so it's not just, it becomes something more. And that's how treasured these baskets are, that, you know, back in the day, there were families that the only way a person could feed their family was to make baskets, and they knew which wealthier people in the community would buy baskets from them. And that's how they, you know, so baskets started out as this functional object, then became like a source of economy and the art. And so they've always meant more than its parts. And Perry does an interview project at her tribe's 4th of July picnic, and she and her other fellow interns, they interview elders about black ash baskets. And what she is surprised to find out is that not every elder has pleasant connotations with the baskets. Some who had gone to boarding school, they weren't home to learn making baskets, and they were punished severely for, you know, when they would speak the language or do anything related to their culture. So seeing the baskets was like a reminder of that pain and loss. And so Perry realizes the impact that boarding schools had in her own community, because not every person had a good feeling about baskets, and the ones that did, like she, had a greater understanding about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's that part when the young people are talking about the interviews that they're doing with the elders about the baskets, and how they go in sort of expecting like, it's just going to be a kind of tedious conversation about a basket, but how the stories really go to work on them and really move them. And allow them to touch that history, you know, in ways that they hadn't had the chance to before.
Right.
Yeah. I was just thinking too how beautiful is and strategic and feels in some ways that there are seeds in the basket, and those seeds are then. See, again, I don't want to give away stuff, But those seeds are viable, you know, they have life in them yet. And it made me think of another seed keeping and seed passing on book, the Diane Wilson's Seed Keeper.
The Seed Keeper, right.
Yeah, and how that becomes kind of a metaphor, a figure for, you know, intergenerational knowledge, transfer and transmission, but also recovering that, which even can happen just by smelling the basket. That's what I love about that passage. Causes her to hear something too that she hadn't heard before. So it might be a good time to talk about Anishinaabemowin, in that it's a language that marks off. I'm still obsessed with the object thing because I don't believe in it. Anishinaabemowin, I think, kind of gives proof for that too. That, you know, things are animate. It marks off animacy or inanimacy. So could you share something about, you know, the language and?
Well, so I received a life-changing book deal from Macmillan in 2019, and my first book, Firekeeper's Daughter, was published in the spring of 2021. And in that, the main character, Donis, she wakes up every morning and she says a prayer outside before she goes on her morning run. And she says the prayer in Anishinaabemowin, what we call our language. And I don't provide a glossary. Macmillan had asked me to provide a glossary, and I pushed back and said that I want the book to be Ojibwe centered, and including a glossary immediately makes it not that. And that my challenge was, if I was a good enough writer, that the reader should be able to glean the meaning through context. And they, you know, they supported me in that decision. And in my second book, I go a step further, and Perry, who is Donis's niece, so the stories are 10 years apart. So the cute little 6-year-old twins in the first book are now 16, and one is the main character in Warrior Girl. And Perry has been raised in a home where they speak the language fluently. And so the way that I use language in the story is more conversational, whereas with Donis in the first book, it's more introductions and prayers, and that's kind of the extent of her comfort with using the language. And whereas Perry, I have actual conversations in there. And so, yeah, that's just one example of the language. And then I shared this last night too. So when I was, when my manuscript was going through copy edits and that, I had to make a decision whether I was going to use a phonetic spelling for the language, or if I was going to use what we call the double vowel system. And in Ojibwe language, instructors told me that if I picked the double vowel system, that standardizes pronunciation and spelling, and that way my book could be used as a supplemental text in Anishinaabe Ojibwe language courses. And so I made that decision, but my dad, who was fluent, he spells everything phonetically, and so he's still like kind of salty about that decision that I made. But I was like, but Dad, it'll be used in classrooms now. And, but yeah, he's still irked about it. So, you know, there's all these conversations about language and how we use it. And there was a book that I read by an Indigenous author from New Zealand, and the book was called Better the Blood by Michael Bennett. And that, the author does footnotes at the bottom of each page of any defining every Indigenous word that's used, and including historical footnotes. And it was really fascinating. I enjoyed the book and I enjoyed the footnotes. And it just goes to show how different authors take different approaches in how best they want to tell that story.
Yeah. I'm very familiar with orthography wars and debates over how to write down, say, Dakota and Lakota languages. And I love the idea that there is a multiplicity of ways of going about it. The no glossary, that feels really familiar to me too, that a publisher would insist on translating, for a broad readership. And one of the things I think you do really, really elegantly, super skillfully in both your novels, and there's a third coming, right? We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
In both of your novels is that you're able to meet different audiences and to meet their to anticipate and to meet their needs so profoundly. And I think about you're a Native reader, an Indigenous reader, a young person especially, being able to see themselves in the characters and feeling seen in return, by what's happening in these stories. And especially through the language, and especially maybe Ojibwe and Anishinaabe folks. But I think too of non-Native or settler readers, and the gesture that you make to translate, not just the Anishinaabe Moan, not just the Ojibwe language, but protocols, right? What it means to smudge, offer tobacco. You talk about you narrate the 7 grandfathers' teachings, I think in the first novel more than the second. But how do you think about sort of translating? How far were you willing to go to meet those different audiences? Did you have to think about it carefully?
Originally my primary audience was my daughter and my nieces and former teen students of mine, wanting to write a book that I wished I could have read in high school. So, Ojibwe teens were kind of like my primary, but I know that so many of our teens aren't raised in their community, and so I had to go with the baseline that probably they might not know anything. And I wanted the book to be a gentle way of welcoming them and getting them started, hopefully on a path where they can feel a connection with their community, with the language, with cultural teachings. So that's what that was my primary intention for the book. However, being an educator, my whole career has been trying to improve public school education for Native students, because 93% of Native students attend public schools. Only 7% attend Bureau of Indian Education schools or private schools. I really wanted my book to have a wider market reach, and so that's where realizing that my audience would be broader, and really trying to improve public school education about Native Americans for all students, and then too, writing a young adult novel that is on the upper cutting edge of what young adult is, and knowing it would be marketed as a adult crossover. So I knew I was going to be reaching more people than than maybe what got me started writing.
Yeah. And if you haven't read the second book, Warrior Girl Unearthed, there is like a bibliography, not just a bibliography, right, in the back where you give you give citations for mostly epigraphs like you have between chapters, some from settler anthropologists, some from Native critiques of anthropology. So I think it's a wonderful teaching tool.
The last thing I wanted to do was to have a dry story, and Perry is such a lively, funny person, and so her mentor Cooper he wants to, he takes her on as like an apprentice, and she decides that they're repatriation Jedi, and she's his Padawan, and so he gives her a list of books, and he wants her to read these books, and so in the back of the book I include Cooper's list for Jedi, for Padawans, and so that's kind of a beginner's list, and then something a little more advanced, he provides a list. So, and that was a fun way to think about sharing resources with teen readers and have them think about sometimes these academic texts are really dry, and so
I don't know what you mean.
Spoiler alert. And so I just, really wanted to try to encourage students to maybe pick one of the sources in the back, and I made sure some were video sources and things that were accessible.
Yeah, very cool. And that's one of the ways I feel like that novel in particular is doing a different kind of work than typical YA, typical young adult novels. Both, I think, of the novels, like you said, really push, I think, the boundary of what YA could be. But I think you're doing, like, what is it YA that you're doing, or is it like indigenous YA?
It's YA.
Okay.
So the difference between an author writing young adult versus adult is a young adult author is taking care with their youngest reader. First, do no harm. So young adult doesn't shy away from difficult topics. In fact, I think they do a better job than adult texts in discussing difficult issues. There's a care and respect for that young reader, and it's kind of like there's just more attention paid to maybe giving that reader some breathing room, not trauma piling on them, having characters that do know about resources. So I think there's something that's inherently respectful about the relationship the author has to that reader that isn't present in, necessarily present in adult.
Yeah. The reason I ask is because I think about YA and I think about like Divergent and Harry Potter, and it's always like some unique, misunderstood like individual, who overcomes their misunderstood loner uniqueness and becomes more grown up as a consequence. But like what I see in your novels is that happens in a way, but it's because of the community. It's because of all the relatives coming around that person. Like very literally, I'm not going to give stuff away. I'm not trying not to, but in really like literal ways, supporting each other, and in less literal ways, like giving love, showing up in all kinds of forms. So that's what I was getting at. I wasn't trying to like force you to answer.
Oh, no, and elders are a part of my community, and so of course they're going to be part of my story, and they're not just going to be window dressing. So, when and elders adapt to technology, and so you have elders playing a very critical role in Donna's story, and coming to her aid when she thinks she has no resources available to her. Just one elder sitting next to her in a car, and she's at her lowest moment, and then realizes what resource elders are. And I wanted to show elders like there's a group text that they have, and I did that because my dad is in his 80s, and he used to complain about when the kids and I would go visit, and the kids would be on their phones, and so in his town there was a group teens. Senior citizens could get a free iPad if they agreed to let teens doing a service learning project tutor them. So my dad got this iPad and a teen taught him how to use it, and we cannot get him off of that iPad now. And I really think it helped him so much during the pandemic. He's always on there. He's like, plays dobro, so he's either listening to banjo or dobro videos, or Ojibwe language classes, or powwow music, just all of his, all the things, and it just helped him to feel connected to the world.
Yeah. Speaking of connections, I wanted to share a passage from, we've been talking about the second novel, but from the first novel. And it's a description, you mentioned powwows too. It's a description of Jamie, the character, who is in a relationship eventually with Donis, the protagonist and narrator of this book. And really quick, it's a short passage, but it gets at something I think that's really cool and beautiful. Do you mind?
Yeah.
Okay. We talked about this beforehand. So it doesn't look like I'm overing on Angeline reading. So I lean into Jamie, speaking into his ear as he scans the panoramic kaleidoscope. This is when the fancy shawl dancers are entering the arena. All these dancers, imagine that each one is an atom, forming molecules of dancers for each category. Traditional, fancy, grass, jingle. You see the whole entity. I point with my lips at the sea of dancers. They entered the arena single file, but their line has spiraled around the drum arbor. Not a speck of grass is visible in the space. Now focus on just one dancer, say a jingle dress dancer. Jamie dutifully fixes his gaze. Every atom has this is Donis talking. Every atom has subatomic parts. Her regalia includes a dress, belt, moccasins, and a lot of other items. Dancers don't start out with their full regalia. They get it bit by bit. Each piece is a connection to her family, her teachers, and even to ancestors generations back. If you know the story of her regalia, who and where and why each item came to be, then you know her. We all remain standing as the singing is led by drum beats, so powerful they reverberate through the bleachers to my feet, as if pulsing my own heart. I can feel Jamie's gaze. I breathe deeply, inhaling the songs, then meet his eyes. You know the saying, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts? Jamie nods. Grand entry is the whole, I continue. It's the synergy of all the teachings. My macro theory of niche connectivity may not make sense to anyone except me, but seeing Jamie's excitement, I want to share it with him. And I think it's just, what I find so striking, so beautiful, is that to see that connectivity, and it's like, what's it called? A murmuration of bird, where they all move with one kind of motion. Is that the right word? Yeah. It's like that, but it's Ojibwe, murmuration, being in relation, in this profound relation, and in synchrony, in synchronization with one another. And that's another thing I don't think I would ever see in like Harry Potter. I don't know. I don't want to pick on Harry Potter. That's, I think there are really differences, and really profoundly moving ones. So we should check time. Jordan? Okay, thank you. There's so much to talk about. To come back to NAGPRA, I don't know if you had the chance to visit the Peabody.
I did.
You did?
I did, yes. And I got to meet staff that are doing the working on NAGPRA.
Yeah.
And Emily, the curator, and I got a tour, and it was wonderful. It was glad to see this place that I've heard so much about, and I'm not saying anything, hopefully, that is brand new news to you, but Harvard has not had the best reputation when it comes to they certainly when I let friends know that I was coming here, they were like, make sure you bring someone back, like, you know, and, you know, and, but it's like respecting the staff that are doing what they're doing and, you know, their good hearts in it, and not viewing them as responsible for the previous 30 years of how the university has handled, or rather not sidestepped NAGPRA. And so it was really good to be in that space and have good conversations. And, you know, one of my goals is I would love for Warrior Girl Unearthed to be supplemental text for any university student that's studying, you know, museum studies, archaeology, anthropology, social work. Like, I just want that to, because it talks about this academic issue or this topic of NAGPRA in a way that really cuts to the emotional core and the way that a person from a tribal community views these objects, views these items differently than, and that's how I think we continue making change and improvements in, you know, in the field, is the training of, you know, the people that are going through training now that are going to be carrying out, you know, work. And so yeah, it was an honor to meet the staff and to see the space. And so yeah, I'm really glad I had time to do that.
Yeah, I know a number of Peabody folks are here tonight, so, and I agree. It's only my second year here teaching, but even in that time I've seen remarkable things. There was a major sort of repatriation event that happened when was it now? Fall or early summer with the boarding school hair clippings. Yeah, where relatives of my own, the hair clippings were from several different communities, mostly Spirit Lake up in North Dakota, but also Siston, Wahpeton, down a bit further south. And the delegations that came, you know, did a beautiful ceremony and took those relatives home. Mm-hmm. That's what I was driving at in that opening, like, very loaded, long question was, you know, I don't believe that these are objects, and clearly you don't either through the book, that these are relatives, you know. And I think that's, I don't know. I asked about audiences too, and like, I know you're in the business of education, and you do it beautifully. And this is even, I think, more than education, it's like paradigm shifting, right? You're inviting readers to fundamentally change the way that they see a thing. Is it a dead object? Is it inert, or is it a relative? Right? And I think that's the fundamental ethical challenge that you pose in that book. And I thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah. So I did want to ask about, because another one of the sort of major plot points in both of the novels is violence against Native women, or explored through the missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. And I know you've talked elsewhere about the relationship between that and repatriation. Right? So I was wondering if you might
Sure. So
do it again here.
You know, with my books, there's always the plot and the elevator pitch for that. So Warrior Girl is, you know, Indigenous Lara Croft. Firekeeper's daughter was Indigenous Nancy Drew meets 21 Jump Street. But there's always the theme of the story. It's just dressed up like this Nancy Drew or Lara Croft. And so with Warrior Girl, the common thread is the ownership of Indigenous bodies, past and present. And so delving into that in terms of academic study, you know, these ancestral remains, and then how the issues regarding how, I'll say, Indigenous women are treated and looked at when we go missing. I mean, you have Native women going on Facebook and posting something and it says, please know if I go missing that I did not go willingly, and no matter what anyone tries to tell you, I did not run away. I would never run. And that there was like this whole thing where like Native women were posting this because every time one of us goes missing, it's like, oh, well, if they're young, oh, they're a runaway. Oh, they ran off with some guy. Oh, they did this and that. And so the whole issue about the lack of resources, the lack of attention paid to, and the jurisdictional issues too. So really the archaeology and the, looking at indigenous bodies in that lens, and seeing the ways, it's, yeah. And so I try to do that. I'm an educator, and so when I write, I just can't help but try to educate, but to do it in a way that, where people will learn about tribal enrollment and blood quantum and a whole host of other issues that they don't know about. And to do it in a way that where I'm not scolding anyone. I want everyone to know these things.
Yeah, that's, the not scolding bit, that just shows what an amazing teacher you are.
And I would say, anytime you're at an event and you hear a land acknowledgement, please, someone stand up and challenge the audience to pick a book by a Native author, read it, rate it online, review it online, and recommend it to 5 friends. That's how you make a real difference, rather than a land acknowledgement that may make you feel that might move you, but I want something that's going to actually have an impact. And for Indigenous authors, 9 times out of 10, we were not the ones getting the book deals and telling our stories, and that is changing. And so reading, rating, reviewing, recommending, that is gold to an author and will help sustain careers.
Yeah, here. Can we finish with a light question? 5? Okay. I'm anticipating someone's going to ask about your writing process, because that's standard fare. So, but I kind of want to hear it, first. So how did you go about writing? Because I think it's an unusual, and it's pretty remarkable how you wrote the first novel, at least, that you were saying last time.
So I had the idea for Firekeeper's Daughter when I was a senior in high school. A good friend of mine went to a different school nearby, and she was a good friend looking out for me and said, hey, there's this new boy. I think he's your type. I think you might want to meet him. And so I was like, okay. And a few weeks later, she's like, nah, he's not really your type. He doesn't play football. That was the kiss of death. And he hangs out with the really hardcore stoners. And then a month before graduation, there was a drug bust, and it turned out that the new boy was actually an undercover police officer. And this was a couple years before the original 21 Jump Street. So I was just gobsmacked by the idea of a young-looking law enforcement officer posing as a high school student. And I remembered my little romantic mind was like, what if we would have met, and what if we liked each other? Or what if it wasn't that he liked me, but he needed my help? And then just that seed of an idea was, why would some undercover drug investigation need the help of an ordinary 18-year-old Ojibwe girl? So that was me at 18. And then, went to college, got married, had a career, worked in different tribal communities. And I started to fill in those puzzle pieces, like, oh, what if it was a federal investigation on a reservation? And, what if the drug had a recipe that could be tweaked or manipulated? What if something mysterious got added that might have a cultural component? And what if this 18-year-old girl was great at chemistry, but also knew about traditional medicines, knew her culture and language, and was connected to everybody and everything? she would be the ideal confidential informant for an FBI investigation. That only took me 25 years to work through that. So when I was 44, I was just like, girl, you're burning daylight. You always said you were gonna write this story, and so I just one morning woke up a half hour before the kids. I sat at the family computer, made my first ever cup of coffee, and started writing. And it took 10 years of writing different drafts before I felt the story was ready for to find an agent and get the deal. So, very long time in coming.
It's amazing. It's so complex and it's so rich. They both the novels are, but there's like this density about the first one that's amazing.
Yep.
Maybe we can we go to this thing? Be like that elder who just can't stop using the iPad. Okay. We can just start from the top. So wait, these get upvotes? Are you all voting on these? Is popularity involved in this? Should I like read from the... I'm being serious, I don't actually know. Okay. I was gonna start with the top, because I think it's a good one. What is your favorite memory or thing about Sault Ste. Marie and Sugar Island?
The smell of campfire that would always be going. We would spend, my dad is Ojibwe, my mom's not. My dad left the area when he was 16 and he joined the Navy. He didn't have a birth certificate because he was born on the island, so he was able to join the Navy. He was 17 when his birth certificate was created. Yeah. So he joined the Navy, met my mom, and we were raised downstate in Southwest Michigan. But every summer we would go back up north and spend summers with our grandparents on Sugar Island and run around, play with cousins. And so really the smell of campfire just takes me right back there.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a lot of good campfire scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the novel. Good. Okay, how about this one? Have you ever borrowed elements from people you know in real life for your characters? Uh-oh.
Borrow. I'm inspired by real people, but I try to be really careful about, I'd say the closest I've come is Granny June. She's inspired by my cousin Elaine's grandma. We called her Tapun. And I would take her to garage sales for James Michener hardcovers, and she would always start every conversation as if we were in the middle of an argument. And I used to think she didn't like me, and then I realized it's the people she was polite to are the ones that she didn't like.
Oh, yeah.
So,
silent.
But yeah, one time we were going to garage sales, and I turned this corner too quick, and my tire squealed, and she goes, "That's one way to take a corner." And I don't know, she was just such a character. And so there's elements of her in Granny June, but then I'm careful to make Granny June more than that, because that wouldn't be fair to lift a person and do that, so yeah.
The second part of that question was, have they ever recognized themselves in the writing? If you have.
I would say Elaine recognizes parts of her grandma, and then there's a part of my sister that's in the character of Lily, and my parents definitely, because my sister was the worst parallel parker in the world. So I made Donis's best friend Lily have that attribute also, and my mom and dad, when they read that was, my sister passed away, and that was like a part of her that always made them laugh, and so the idea that there's this quirky, funny girl that can't parallel park for shit, and that so it made my parents happy.
Nice. This is a question about visiting Harvard. What's your experience been like on this visit, and how is it similar or different from the way you write about this place in your book?
I didn't really write about Harvard in the book. I did include an epigraph that, in the epigraph for one of the weeks, that Shannon O'Loughlin from the Association on American Indian Affairs wrote a letter to Harvard president saying, you know, why are there more deceased Native Americans in your collection than you have living students on campus?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, I mean, the prestige of, Harvard, but to be here and see, you know, students running across campus and now they have, you know, they're on those like the wheelie things and that, but
They shouldn't be.
yeah.
It's not.
But no, I mean, so it has that campus feel and definitely, and but to be here and to know and having learned about the, you know, original charter, the original mission to educate Native students, and to hear from people how well they believe the university is honoring that. And so, yeah, I think that's my biggest takeaway from being here.
Good. Yeah. I wasn't trying to play sort of elder by saying the scooters shouldn't be here, but I almost got, like, every day I almost get killed by one. So this is a question I actually wanted to ask too. So thank you for whoever wrote this. It has to do with Donis's love for science and botany. And did you tune into your own passion for those things in writing her character?
The first draft of Firekeeper's daughter, Donis, was me. It was how I would react in situations, what I would have done. I quickly learned that Donis was going to have to be a lot better at chemistry and math and than I was. And so I had to do research, and she kind of became, and I've never played hockey a day in my life, but she's played all 4 years on the boys varsity high school team. So Donis definitely became independent of me by draft 3 and has continued to just be very different. And so really I had to research and come up with these things, and my fear is always a chemistry teacher, professor reading the book and letting me know that I got something terribly wrong. So I you know, that's, I think the beauty that I've learned in creating characters is that they are different than you, and then as a person that has ADHD and can like hyper focus on any given topic for a set period of time, that I could do these deep, you know, dives into topics, and then once I'm done working on that part of the story, like it's left, that it all leaves my mind. It's, yeah, I got what I needed out of it, and so I'm on to the next topic.
Yeah. Let's see. This is from Ann Browdy, who's there. Hi, Ann. Has your experience of hearing stories influenced your writing style? And how have you balanced demands of commercial success and your commitments to community?
I just grew up. There's always funny people in the family that are really good at storytelling, and even when you hear the same story over and over, it's never quite like a really good storyteller you know, reacts and pulls someone else in, and it's like stand-up comedy. You know, you can do have the same bit, but the way that you interact with the audience can really take on a different flow or a different feel to it and add something new to that experience. So that's, you know, for that part of it. And then in terms of balancing the, you know, commercial and community, there's the money that I make from royalties of books and from doing speaking events. And then there's the pro bono things that I do. For example, I always go to Sault Ste. Marie at least once a year, because those students, those high school students, they are determined to find out which science classroom at Sioux High is the one that I based Donis's uncle's classroom on. And I just want to be present for them to like answer the questions that they have and make sure that I'm, taking extra care with them. And so I do a lot of like popping into a book club via Zoom for like maybe 30 minutes or a classroom. So I do try to give back in ways that I can. I can't always honor every request, but I really do try to, pop into a class if they've studied my book to at least, 20 minutes to 30 minutes is something that I can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are maybe time for 2 more questions. What do you? Okay. There's 2 really good ones. They're all pretty good. Where did it go? They move. How do you think? And this is something we've sort of touched on, but maybe not as directly as this question asks it. How do you think about gender and sexuality within your novels? Does it draw upon Western or Indigenous ideas of gender and sexuality?
I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
There's a character in the first book, and I mentioned her, Macy Manitou, talking with a guy
Mm-hmm.
in the, at the hockey arena, and then later that she's talking to a girl, and the way that she interacts with them, she's, and I don't spell it out, but, that Macy's bisexual, and it's not, Donis doesn't go like, oh, and then she, was talking. It's very much a matter of fact thing and not anything that's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think too, like in relation to, depict like ideas and practices of sexuality, like what the second novel does, very forcefully is to say that, predation, toxic masculine predation is not normal. It should not be normative, right? And it's certainly not a norm within the community, right? Or shouldn't.
I would say every community has to deal with misogyny and their own biases and that.
Yeah.
So, this is a difficult topic in Indian country, but there can be communities that are really misogynistic, and what's hard for me is when we talk about a patriarchal and misogyny and traditional, and to me there's like I would need to write an encyclopedia's worth of story to really tackle that, but so.
No, absolutely. And there's this one image that really sticks with me, and I don't think I'll be giving too much away by saying of a grandma who has been charged with taking care of an infant as part of, let's say, a repatriation process, right? Near the end of the novel, and it's just so profoundly moving the way that that she takes on that role, because she's the only one who can really, or because it has to be a woman beyond childbearing age, right? I think is
there's certain things about that ceremony of there's certain different tribes, different nations have different teachings, but I did learn from people that do the work in my community about women who are childbearing age aren't elders are willing to handle the little babies or little children, their remains, and so I think that's just one example. And I tried to like when Perry is preparing her fellow people for this heist that they're gonna do, and she's like, you're gonna wanna cry, but
Yeah.
you need to sing and comfort them. They shouldn't be worrying about your, you know.
Yeah.
So that was another thing that people have commented about.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fact that it's Indigenous women who are, you know, at the heart of this final sort of act, right, of return. Is that a difference from how did they put it, Western practices of gender? I think it probably is. There's one, I lost it, and it has to do with the W word, but you said that word earlier, I heard.
Wendigo?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I get some people have, I've heard you shouldn't say it when, you know, there's snow on the ground, but I think we're safe. I don't know, maybe. It's cloudy, but it's not, I don't think, snowy. So yeah, the question is about the Wendigo, and where did it go? How do you approach writing about taboo or sensitive cultural information like the Wendigo?
I think the Wendigo is like really out there and has been written about, so I feel okay sharing what the bit that I shared about, but there are things that I won't write about it. And so it's like when Donna decides that she's gonna help the FBI, how could an Ojibwe girl, you know, federal agents aren't necessarily your friend, and especially on a reservation, and she decides that she will help them because she's gonna do her own investigation parallel to theirs, and she's gonna decide what information she will share with them and what information they don't have a right to, because she realizes at that point that she's not just protecting her tribal community from, you know, future drug deaths, she's protecting Indigenous knowledge, and that she's a protector of that. And that's how I was able to have this Ojibwe girl be okay with being a confidential informant for the FBI.
Yeah, and the questioner, I don't know, it seems like may have read the whole, although you did mention the Wendigo earlier. But you treat it kind of in a few different ways too, like this being appears in different kind of guises, different forms, right? It's not always like a predatory Zaganash man, right? It can be the anthropologists, right? Who we saw from your reading at the beginning. How about this? Let's have one more maybe about writing. What would you tell aspiring writers here about, you know, how to go about this business?
You know, if you just have a story that you've wanted to tell, and I say I could hand my plot outline to anybody, and I would be confident that they could not write the story that I would write. And so think about your story and your writing and your experience and how only you can tell that particular story. And I say write freely, write whatever you want, don't censor yourself, just write. Writing is different than editing, and it's a completely different mindset. And so I had a mantra while I was writing, and it was, I write to preserve my culture, and I edit to protect it. And so write freely. I wrote about ceremony, I wrote about a whole bunch of stuff. Some scenes were really steamy too, like explicit. But then it's in the revising that you really think, should I include this? Does this need to be there? Or can I, what absolutely needs to be on page and what can be best left to the imagination, or what stuff I decided I didn't have the right to include actual ceremony in the book. And each writer is different, because I have an author friend who, she feels if she reads about a certain ceremony from 3 different sources online, she considers it like open property to be able to write about. And so she draws that curtain differently than I do. But then I did hear from a reader who was from a tribe out in the Southwest, And after Firekeeper's daughter came out, and she DM'd me and said, yeah, I liked your book, but damn, you Northern Indians give way too much away. And I respected that, yeah, where I pulled the curtain and felt I was being within my, teachings, and that I felt I could justify anything that I included in the book. That was way further than where she would be comfortable going, or where her community, and so that's the beauty of more Indigenous authors telling their stories and telling them in the way that we want, and not someone from outside of our community coming in, mining us for our stories, for our trauma, and then packaging them up and making them marketable for publishers and for a mass market. It needs to be our stories the way that we want to tell them.
Yeah, helicopter research, you call it.
Yeah.
Or extraction.
Yeah, extraction.
Yep. Well, wonderful. Let me thank Angeline Boulley again for being here and for the beautiful work. And the work that, I was going to talk about the third novel. Do you want to give like a...
Sure. My third book, Warrior Girl Unearthed is coming out in paperback on May 6th. It's got a brand new cover redesign and a bonus chapter of the big heist from the other twins' perspective. And yes, and then the third book is called Sisters in the Wind, and it comes out September 2nd, and it deals with the Indian Child Welfare Act and those teens, the children that get removed from community, and the ones who find their way back home, and the ones who don't.
Amazing. Wonderful. Thank you for that and all your work.
Miguel.
Oh, thank you.
So again, want to thank Angeline and Chris for taking the time and speaking in front of us, and for all the great questions and for all you coming out. Want to thank all of our partners in this. It doesn't happen with just one person, but many folks across the university make things like this happen. So again, thank you to all of our partners and supporters in this. Thank you to the HUNAP staff as well for all of your work. Thank you all for attending the annual lecture. Really appreciate it. Have a good night.